Hello and welcome to Getting to Know Nuendo. I'm Lee Riley, and in this episode we'll explore the basics of designing audio for games in Nuendo. And just a little philosophical look at the slight differences between the approach for audio post-production sound design and the sound design for video games. In other words, linear versus non-linear. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, fantastic. We're getting a big storm starting here right now. Hopefully we'll get through this in one piece. Thank you for joining us today. Now, okay, let's see the philosophy. Well, here's a typical audio post-production project. So let's take a look at it. Of course, it's got a video. We're actually designing sound to picture. So this is the linear approach. Right, let's just play it and let's see where we're at. Oh boy. Right. Okay. Kind of a tough scene, but there's a lot of stuff going on there, right? And we've briefly talked about this, but I want to approach this from the differences, the similarities, and the differences. So here's the linear approach, whereas these sounds are set to a fixed picture. When the picture gets locked, you will have the sound design team has to go ahead and just cut in the Foley, cut in the backgrounds, cut in the sound effects, and these are all multi-track, right? So we have this car from all these different perspectives, right? So she's driving the car, that's exterior, over the hood, and then we've got the street perspective, and that's all Foley, that's made from scratch, right? With our very infamous Ben Conley there doing the high heels, and the bags and everything else, and the cloth. So we talked about setup for this, but I think I want to talk a little bit more about Foley in another episode. But this is a multi-track setup, right? All these sound effects have their own place. It's constant. The way I look at it is, with audio post, you see a sound, and then hear a sound, right? Wherever you see that sound happening. In other words, you know that she's about to get hit here, and here is the impact sound, right? Okay, so then there's the skids and everything else. These are set to a linear timeline, right? And if I grab any of those and move them, I'm at the mercy of shifting something in time, right, when it shouldn't be. Now, I could take these tracks, I could take my sound effects, I could take the cloth and the props and everything else that are recorded and sound designed and put together, and then we have the perspectives on, each perspective of background. So we have all these individual people working on this, and then it goes into one consolidated session. Maybe it gets broken down into stems, which we could talk about at a later episode if you would like. creating stems, and then creating a final mix. And that final mix, you're condensing and summing all of those tracks down and funneling them all down to a 2-channel, a 6-channel, an 8-channel, or a Dolby Atmos multi-channel setup, right? So that is the essence of audio post. Similarities will happen, but that's where it ends, okay? Because let's take a look. I'm going to close this video a second here. And what I'm going to do, without further ado, is bring up a game, a simple game that was designed in Unity. And here it is. Okay. For this, the background on this one is the fact that we can have a single player. It's very, very easy to play. All I'm doing is moving my mouse from left to right. And this is non-linear because we're creating assets to go into the game. We're not lining them up with any particular timeline. You're all at the mercy of the person who's playing the game, right? It's completely variable. It's completely random. There's always things that are changing, and it all depends on the relationship between the player and the sound emitter. These are single-shot assets. Okay, let me just, without further ado, play the third spell. There's 5 spells in this, and I'll just keep it down to a minimum. But we're designing sound to go to these elemental spells.
Ignis.
Awesome. So we have a huge fire loop that envelops the player as he summons the flames from within the earth, right? And there's a spell cast, there's a spell itself. These are individual assets that could actually be on an asset list, a sheet, and this further backs up the fact that this is non-linear. Right? We're just creating these single-shot assets to place in the game. So here is our 4th spell.
Draco Aqua.
Awesome. So that's a huge water dragon that comes out and just plunges back to Earth. So he's summoning this water dragon. So these are the elements of Earth, fire, etc., right? So last but not least is ice.
Glacialis Crepitus.
Awesome. So yes, in a way, they are timed to picture, if you want to say that. That's a similarity. But how do we do that? Well, okay, what I want to do is we'll revisit this game in a minute, because what we're going to do is take a section of that, let's say spell 5, and implement all that by using Nuendo and by using Wwise by Audiokinetic. Okay, I will close this temporarily, and what I'm going to do is close this audio post session and say bye-bye to it. Excellent. Talk amongst yourselves. Right, there is my game audio session. It's taking a while. Right. Okay. So you're thinking, hold on a second. Oh, whoa, what's going on? I know you're more organized than that, Lee. Well, it seems like it's off to the side and skewed to the side, but there's a reason, there's a method to my madness here, why I'm doing this. I want this to be positioned here because I'm going to be physically dragging stuff into a portal, which gets me into Wwise. And then the implementation will happen in Wwise. Right? And then we're going to use that middleware to answer the game calls. That's really what it is, which are set, these triggers are set in the game via Unity. So let's take a look at that. But before we start, I wanted to kind of go over the fact that the similarities, right? So I've designed this sound. Well, let's take a listen to these individual assets themselves on that spell.
Glacialis crepitus. Glacialis crepitus.
Of course, because I had it all selected, didn't I? And looped.
Glacialis crepitus.
Okay, now I've got my last sound muted here, so let me just do this one again.
Glacialis crepitus.
I did not add lightning, I promise. That was to the second spell, which we haven't seen. That's the actual lightning outside. Awesome. Right. So I want to talk about Game Audio Connect. That is the portal. Before I get there, really briefly, is you have noticed that these windows, these workspaces, if you will, have shifted. So for me to work here and drag things on somewhere and see how it is to the left or to another application, I really want to set this workspace right here. So what I've done earlier, I could make all these different workspaces. You would just add a workspace. I mean, set it up the way you want it first, with the windows and floating windows, how you want it. And then you can make it global, or you can make it per project. Okay, so then you can just go ahead and name that, and it stores globally if you want, or by project, and it stores right here. At any given point, whatever you've got selected, you can just update it if you want to do a quick change. So the reason why I've got this over here is because I'm going to have something in the background here. Pure and simple. Now, what is that? Well, we'll get to that. There is no engine connected right now. It is switched on. It is enabled. That's the activation for the Game Audio Connect itself. Okay, so I've activated that, but there's no engine connected. But I'm going to go to preferences straight away. Now, gaming, you may be working on this on your own computer, or you may be working on a network, and there's a bunch of you working and sharing. So this is very important here, what we can do. This portal is enabled with a standard port. So it's local Game Audio Connect TCP port, and I've enabled that. You have to enable that for it to work correctly. Now, embedded in the audio file, I want metadata. Okay, so certain metadata like naming, you can have bit depth, sample rate, all these different things in there, or you can have them in a separate file. But I'm going to embed them in that because I want that to be like a broadcast wave, where, in other words, it's a wave file that contains all kinds of information. Now, if you're working as a team, like I said, a while ago I was working on a team using this, and we used Perforce. Now, Perforce is a sharing platform that everyone can log into, and you have your own parts of the server, but the shared servers, the shared areas, shared folders, shared projects, which you can actually use to trade assets and update assets and everything else. And this is one way of using Perforce and including this into your workflow. Okay, I'm going to cancel that. Now, you see there's no engine connected. Okay, so what I want to do next off is go to Audiokinetic Wwise. Now I'm going to launch Wwise itself. Talk amongst yourselves, because it takes a a few seconds. How's everyone doing? Fantastic. Okay. Right, so it launches a project launcher. And what that allows me to do is utilize the implementation, right? So we need to implement this. So what I've got right here is the path to where I've saved my project. I'm going to open this selection. Okay. There we go. So inside of that, I've already done this earlier, right? There are my sounds, individual assets. Awesome. Yeah, that's a bit loud, isn't it? I was kind of clipping. Sorry. Cool. That's great. So these are individual assets. Then they're not being summed together in this DAW. They may be overlapping and summed on the output of the game, right? Non-linear, remember, right? So you will notice that these are red, and red generally means something pretty bad, but these events or assets are waiting to be populated. There is no sound connected with those like these. The sound's right here. That's my sound asset loaded into a virtual folder, and that's what we're going to implement together today. Right. I'm going to select one of these. When I go back into Nuendo, now you see the reason why I'm doing this with that style of work with the window over to one side, because you're going to see as it gets populated that it's going to go from one DAW straight through a pipeline to another and reside there. Great. So the first one I want to take a look at, actually, there's one thing you have to be very, very careful with implementing and designing for games, is that you can kind of get away with a little bit of an issue sometimes, with naming and things like that. If you miss an underscore, or if you just slightly misspell something, in a audio post world, you might get scolded for it, but it doesn't really stop the workflow dead in its tracks. Whereas with gaming, it does. You have to name this very, very carefully and follow that asset list. Okay. In the more advanced I'm too used to that. A more advanced episode, we'll take a look at that. Okay. Right. So here is our incantation. Let me go ahead and mute those.
Brachialis crepitus.
Okay, I've made that to the timeline. I'm using the timeline because what I did is I captured the game as a video, right? And then placed the video within Nuendo, so that I have some kind of a timeline that I can work with and get the rough idea of what size or how long my assets need to be. Right. They still are called events, but they are going to be assets when they get into Wwise. Let's take that first one, which is the incantation.
Brachialis crepitus.
Okay, let's get that there. You can see that because I've selected this, the portal is ready, and I'm about to export that. So let's look at my little cheat sheet here. I'm going to make sure that... oh, yes, that's right. I forgot. That's why I have a little cheat sheet. I thank you for some of the great comments, by the way. It's really, really nice to see that people are enjoying these videos. Good. Right. Before I do this, I wanted to mention that like a broadcast wave, in other words, you're going to have IXML chunks, which is basically allowing you to save that metadata and utilize this function of going back and forth And I'm going to say back and forth because it's kind of two ways is this pipeline. I'll leave you thinking about that for a second. But that's one thing we have to do. Before I go to this export audio mixdown window, let's try it a different way. We have all set up right here. What I want to do is export selected events. Right. Let's take a look at that. That'll be File, Export, Selected Events. Right. Here we go. So this will allow me to decide whether it's going to be a dry signal or it's going to have the channel settings. For example, there could be some plugins on the track output, or do you want the complete signal path as it goes from group to main output? Or is it the complete signal path and master effects, whatever you've got on your master section? So I'm just going to keep this dry because I embedded, in other words, baked in, that reverb and delay into this particular asset because I don't want to mess with it, right? Once it gets into Wwise, I want it to stay there and everything's fantastic. It is 24-bit. I'm going to use a custom name. I'm going to go into this in a bit more detail in another episode. But here's this gear icon right here, which allows us to determine a bevy of naming schemes, right? So do you want that metadata? Do you want that physical file to have the project name in it? Do you want the folder path to be in there? Do you want the track name that you used? But I'm just going to use the event name. This is simple as just dragging on top, and now it adds it to up front on the file or the suffix, right? Prefix to suffix. And last but not least, I can check what it's going to look like here. Actually, the project name, I'm not seeing a preview. Oh, because I haven't dragged it in. There you go. Right now you can see that it's got the project name in it. I don't want that. Right. Cool. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And then last but not least, look at my file path where I'm exporting this to. I'm actually going to export this straight into that Wwise project. Okay. I could actually have a community folder that I'm putting that into and then go into Wwise and then import it from Wwise. Yeah, but why not? Why don't we just go straight there using the Game Audio Connect? Cool. Open. Export. There we go. There we go. It has gone through the portal. It has got to the audio file importer, and I'm going to hit import because I can see that my path is good. There it is. It supposedly already exists in the folder. I don't know. I must have been messing about with something earlier. But there it is. And it's now gone blue. So there is a bit of a tiny bug in this version. But now it's gone blue. And there is my asset.
Glacialis crepitus. Glacialis crepitus.
Excellent. There it is. Implemented in Wwise. Okay. Let's start doing the other stuff together, right? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Ask me that question again about the 2-pop. I think I did that in one of my earlier episodes, right? Making a 2-pop. Yeah, from years in Pro Tools, I get you. Yeah, completely, because you can just consolidate the clip. You can actually do that in Nuendo as well, but I digress a minute. Yeah. Okay, let's go for... I'm going to take the explosion sound and I'm going to put that in here. I've selected that. It shows up here in the Game Audio Connect. Let's just take a listen to that. So that's the linear aspect, right? Because I can move this around. But even if I move this around anywhere on the timeline, it's still not going to affect how it is in Wwise, right? Because it's a single asset. Right. Shift Option E is my quick key for that. There's my settings. I've already explained this. Let's just hit export. There it is. Import. Excellent. Import. It is implemented. Okay, there's my explosion sound. Cool. All right, let's do these. Now I'm going to use, I could have actually gone in there, and the big reason why I do have that Game Audio Connect down the bottom left, really, and I set up my workspace, is because I can physically drag and drop onto that. And of course, I've already done that, right? So it's going to go in there and in this case, overwrite or use a unique name. So it's going to add nomenclature to it. For some odd reason, there's a temporary folder getting in the way here, so I'm not going to mess with that. But you can actually do that manually. But I prefer to do this method, which is directly just export Mixdown, right? If I was creating right down here, let me just play this segment right here. I'm going to do the aftermath part. Is my next asset. Okay. So that next asset, if I just move this over here, let's unmute that because I've got my sounds in a folder. Okay. That's the collapsible folder. Oops, I hit ice there, didn't I? There's my aftermath. Now, this aftermath itself, the sound is made up right. That's made up of 3 layers, and we're going to bounce this as a stereo asset, just to show you. It's selected in the game. Excuse me. It's selected in Game Audio Connect. And what I want to do is kind of do 2 things at once here. I want to make sure that I create a stereo asset and make a track at the same time and keep it in my project as well as export it. Right. So how do I do that? Well, first off, if you noticed before, I was just really, really quick. Oops. You can use these cycle markers to export these, and it'll bounce that segment, right? And faster than real time, of course, right? Or you can do this in real time. And because I want to create another audio track and have that asset in Nuendo as well, I went in here, and instead of saying do nothing, I've created an audio track. I'm going to create that audio track, or I can put it into the pool, which is similar to like a workspace browser or something like that in another application. But I'm going to create an audio track. Okay. First off, I need to make a cycle marker. Right. So I'm going to, I said right. Watch out. That is the length. Actually, we can make that smaller, can't we? There we are. I'm going to use that as a guide. For those of you who know me by now and been watching other episodes, you know I like to keep things organized and colored and color-coded and all this good stuff. I've got this here. I'm going to hit P, which does my cycle. In other words, it selects in the timeline at the top. And then I'm going to hit Shift and C. Shift and C is going to make a marker to the selection. That's how I've got it. All right. Now, it's the wrong color, so what are we going to do? We're going to color that. I believe it was this one. Excellent. Now, it's not named like the other ones, right? In the description, This is what I'm going to use in the export window, because right now it just says 13, right? This is marker number 13 in this session. What I want to do is name that. So I'm going to use this naming right here by copying that, slap that straight into the description, hit OK. Now that is ready to rock and roll. If I make sure that everything else is muted, I made this mistake a little bit earlier, just before we started the live show. Or was it? Anyway. There is my 13, which is now called Aftermath. Okay, I've selected that. I've selected my output. I want it to be 24-bit, 48K. It is going to be interleaved. It's going to be stereo. I'm going to create an audio track, add this to the queue. This queue is telling me where the path is going, and it tells me all these different things about. Now, I could do multiples of this. I can bounce to multiple places, but it doesn't quite work with what we're doing right now. So, right, start, export. There's my progress. Okay, do I want to copy that file into my project folder? Possibly, right? That's what I want to do. So right now, down the bottom there is the track. It's been bounced, but not only that, went straight through Game Audio Connect, and it went into Wwise. There it is. Import. There before, right? There we go. There's my aftermath sound. There's the bug. And cool. Awesome. It is implemented. Right. So I don't need that right now. I can mute that. I can close that. I'm going to drag this up here. And this is the last asset in that group. So what I want to do is color code that, which I believe was that. Double check it now. Cool. So I've got that there for prosperity, prosperity's sake. Right. What are we up to next? Let's go for Foley cast. This is a Foley asset because it was recorded with Foley, right? This is the spell cast, as the little dude here is casting that spell. So, okay, now that seems a little bit out, possibly, but I did it deliberately like that in the timeline because I wanted it to fit, you know, when it's all summed together, right? So as separate, we're going to take a look at how we can get that to work. Right. I can drag that, can do whatever it needs to be, but I'm going to export it again. I don't need to create an audio track this time, so I'm going to do nothing. I am not going to touch this, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to be super careful that I'm uncheck that. So what was it? It was Foley 5 cast, and let me double check what the name, it is 9. There it is. Okay, I've already named this previously, and I'm going to export this. Great. Number 5, right? No, number 9. Number 9. Yes. Here we go. Foley spell cast. I'm going to, there's nothing, I can't export anything until I hit add queue. There it is. Start queue export. Awesome. Import. There we are. And I'm doing this slowly, right? So basically you can see how this is starting to build up now. There is the Foley cast. Implemented. Just got 2 more to implement. Right. Let's click on that guy. Let's go to freeze. Why not? There's a freeze asset. Notice it's not bouncing from that selection that I made, right? It's bouncing using the marker that I've pre-named. Marker number 11. Everything else is muted. Great. If I did make a mistake, let's say I made this mistake, okay, by not listening and selecting and bouncing that. Of course, it's still summing, right? It's still summing. So let's deliberately make that mistake together, right? This was 11, was it? Yes. Marker number 11. Now, without paying attention, here I am, I'm going in here now. I'm clicking on this to get rid of that. I'm going on exporting this. I make sure add to the queue, and I start to export it. Right. And I'm not paying attention here, and I go in and I say, okay, cool, imports, there it is. And I'm starting to play it back, right? It's got another sound in it. It's got some ice in it. I actually used the wrong example. I should have used something like incantation or something to go with it because they're very crackly together. But trust me, those two assets have bounced together because they're unmuted, right? That's the difference between doing this export mixdown versus another method, versus dragging individually, right? So, whichever one you want. So I made that mistake, right? So I'm going to overwrite it. So I'm going to go there. It's still the same marker. It's still the same everything else. So now I'm going to export that. And there it is. Now, here's the little difference that Wwise will do. I can overwrite this, replace the audio files that are there already. But if I didn't do that, okay, for argument's sake, now you'll see two assets, and like every DAW does, it's going to add a suffix to it, right? Now, this was my original one, but this, if I click on the radial button, I'm choosing this one to play back. I'm playing back this with my space bar. That's all I'm really doing. That's the right one. Okay, it doesn't have that. Hold on. Let me go to my radial button here. See, that's different. I can always use that, but of course, if you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of assets, you know you're going to take up a little bit of a footprint here, and your session's going to be bigger. So what I want to do is go in there and just delete it. Right. So now there's my freeze. Everything's cool. Last but not least is ice. Make sure that's muted. And I'm going to export this, which is number 10. Cool. Right. Export. Get rid of that guy because it's the wrong asset, right? Remove from queue. It is sfx underscore spell underscore 5 underscore ice. Add it to the queue. Boom. Oops. I exported 2, didn't I? Yes, I did. Okay, I'm going to cancel that. $10. Always something has to go wrong live, right? Always. It's the rule of live. Let me get rid of remove all, and then I'm going to add. Oh, I must have something else. Why do we have two assets here? That is interesting. And it's going to manually delete that. That is interesting how that's happened. Okay, start the queue again. All that did was sum the two together. It's going to be louder, right? So I'm going to import that. Now it's renamed itself O2. I could go in there and rename that. But there we go. Awesome. So here are my sounds implemented. Excellent. Right. Here's the question. All right. Look at my little cheat sheet here. Make sure I've got everything that I needed to do. Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. What I'm going to do here is, let's say I'm going to go back to my session. Let's say I've closed it. I finished my work. Everything's cool. Let's deal with a Soundbank now, which actually gets it into the game. All right. So I've done my design. I've grabbed the assets. I've implemented those assets. And then I say, okay, cool. I'm going to close my session. Excuse me. Now, let's deactivate that. And everything's hunky-dory. Now I'm thinking, well, okay, hold on. I can go in here. If I zoom in, I can actually, let's say I made a mistake or I want to change the sound. I can do this manually within Wwise. Depends which workflow you like. I do both. I can go in there and physically change right here, trim the start, and why it's not grabbing that right now, I do not know. Wow, that's very interesting. Okay, well, let's do it that way. Why are you not working? You see the problems that you can have? There we go. So the freeze sound, I can make sure to buy anyone that's used a sampler. That's basically the same thing, right? When you use a sampler, you're re-triggering. And that's all you're doing is re-triggering the start to play back. The file is still the same. It's just starting from a different point. Well, what I could do is I could go and re-edit that and rebounce it through the portal in Nuendo, right? So it can update. But I've just closed Nuendo, right? I actually closed the project, not Nuendo itself. So where did that project go? Cool. Well, I can right-click either here or I can right-click on the sound effect here. Excuse me. And I can go and now look at this in Nuendo. Right, where are we? External. Where is my editor? Show in multi-editor. Did I quit? That's why I didn't activate it. There we go. Edit in Nuendo. That's got to be open. So now it's going to click and it's going to open that project that I had. Wow. Sorry about that. I'm going to cough into the microphone. But that is cool, right? Where the metadata, it works both ways. So it says, okay, I'm going to find your session. Don't worry. As long as it's activated, that is the thing. Cool. So that works both ways. Right. That is about 45 minutes, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up, there's no question. There is the 1K. 1K beep. I know this is... let me see. I think we had to select it and bounce it, right? Oh, I had to use a signal generator. That's right. What I did is I bounced to disk. I added. If you look back, Jake, at his question was, coming out of Pro Tools for years, is there a quick way to make a 1K beep for your 2-pop, right? For 2 seconds prior to first frame of action. There is a way. It isn't really quick, but once you've made one, that's all you need, right? So that pop is a 1K tone. There's a signal generator. You can either put that on a group track, or you can physically place that as an insert, I believe, right here. Tools, test generator. That's right. And then you can use your square wave, right? And set that to 1K. And then you just bounce that to disk for that selection. And that's how it's going to work. And you can actually make a track with that on in the same method that we just used earlier. Awesome. So if you wanted to ask a couple more questions or any kind of questions, be thinking of those while I get rid of my dry throat. Don't know what happened there. Anyway, that time of year where we have lots of pollen and stuff and crazy things in Florida. Okay. We just found out what happened, right, in my little cheat sheet here. If I switch that off, you'll see that it's disabled and it won't show up. That's one of the things that I was in my little cheat sheet here. Right, let's go ahead and export a Soundbank to the game. Let's play the game back, shall we? Because I've made my changes and I've added all that good stuff. So I'm going to save, close this session. Okay, are you going to close? Yeah, go ahead and save. Why not? So let me close that right here. So the simple way to make a Soundbank. Now, Soundbank is the portal file, if you will. And that is, if anyone's a keyboard player, I would equate this to being like exporting a dump, MIDI dump, right? A sysx dump, if you will. And that little file is going to embed itself into the game. What I've done here for cheat purposes is put it into, you can actually show package contents of the game. And within resources, you'll see data and streaming assets, audio, and that's your generated Soundbank, right? So what the Soundbank is doing is allows us to get your connection from the middleware into the game, right? And that's how it gets stored into the game, embedded into the game. All right, so let's go back here. Now, let's create a Soundbank together, and then we should be done. The easiest thing for us to do is select all of our play events. Now, a play event is critical to respond to the trigger. Okay, so this is a great question. Can you play back Awk Official? Can you play back or use MIDI from Nuendo in Wwise? You can actually, and I'm going to talk about that actually in the next episode, whereas there is a MIDI implementation part Wwise. Yeah. So you can, it's a general MIDI setup, so you actually can do that. That's a good question. I haven't actually used the MIDI tracks through that portal, but I imagine it's the same. And we're going to test that together next time, right? By using implement, because I'm going to use music and implement everything in the next episode if you want me back. Awesome. Select everything. Select these play events. These are responding to triggers that the game has. These are embedded into the game. Those will now be layouts. Soundbank. Soundbank is waiting for us. That's the name of the Soundbank. Elemental spells. We're just going to click and drag this onto that. And I'm going to generate selected. And it takes all these, what we have selected. And when I hit that, that now zips through there, creates a brand new sound bank. Now, the reason why we keep going back and forth as game sound designers is we may need to tweak the sound bank or tweak the sounds in the game. And this is ultimately a way of, it's like non-destructive, if you will. So I can go back and change something in Wwise, different levels, right? I can go in and change a level. And if I'm not quite happy with the game itself, the way it sounds, maybe the incantation needs to be a little louder, I can actually change that voice volume in certain areas like makeup gain, etc. Or I could rebounce and send it from Nuendo. So here is the game. Right. Let's open it up, and it will have our brand new sound bank in it. Here we go. Here's spell number 5. I'm going to hit 5.
Glacialis crepitus.
Excellent. So then I'm going to hit 4 to get these spells that we haven't talked about.
Draco Aqua.
Sweet. Soundbank exported. Mission complete. Right. What I'm going to do, just to finish off here, is kind of nip back into my Nuendo 12 session here. Of course, I can do it this way, right? Because I want to talk about the Dragon Cry. I had a bit of fun with that. I will explore this in another episode and talk about the actual physical sound design, but I wanted to start with the basics of how it's actually implemented. There it is, jumping up and down everywhere. Awesome. And there is my session. Let me go ahead and close and mute 5 and just show you real quick what I did with this sound, which is the, what was it, Dragon, where are we now? Where did you go? Oh, Dragon Cry. Anyway. Right. Okay. Of course. There's my start, like a sync point, right? Very, very similar to that. All that is basically saying where the event is, right? You want the event to start from wherever it is. That's a snap point in Nuendo. I could say, play it from here. Or I could say, play it from here, right? That's all that is. Now, what went into that sound asset? Well, okay, there was a camel for a start. Yes. So I'm going to open that up and let's take a look at our camel, which is going to be fairly loud, I think. Just to show you that it is a camel, I'm going to bypass the insert. There it is. Yes, I did use a Camel. And, backed up with... Okay, all three together. Actually, right here, there's my voice designer, which I'm going to talk about in the next episode. I got to keep you coming back, right? Got to keep you on the edge of your seat, waiting to come back with episode 10. So we'll talk about the actual designing when we get there. So I'm going to have a quick look up. Interleave clips. X Music Studios, LA. Does Wwise support pre-mixed multi-channel surround interleave clips? Yes. Yes. Because we used multi-channel. Well, you can take the 2-channel that you have and physically mix, right, into multiple channels in Wwise. But it supports pre-mixed multi-channel. In other words, 5 channels, 4 channels, LCRS, and 5.1. And to answer Andres, his question, well, it's a comment to say, basically, I think it's just 5-channel for the moment. Yeah. They might have done an update because I haven't really used some of the later Wwises, the versions of Wwise. They may have added the 7-channel support. I remember when I was using it a couple of years ago, they came out from Canada to Japan, where we were working, and we talked about multi-channel support. So I think they've implemented that since then, definitely. Andres... Yes, Pro Tools user for more than 12 years. I was like for 20 years or something like that. 5 years ago, or 7 years ago now, I was introduced kicking and screaming to Nuendo by a good friend of mine, a colleague, and I've never looked back. It's just, I use both, and it's just something I enjoy doing, as it's just super powerful. And as you can see today, how powerful it is to export assets directly into Wwise. Cool. So, with that in mind, I'm going to put my little thank you screen up there, right? And yes, I want to thank you for watching. It's always a pleasure to get people in and involved. And I really enjoy doing these episodes. And please be sure to comment, on stuff that you'd like to hear. Like it, subscribe. I think Nuendo has 12,300 subscribers. I think they need a few more. So go ahead and sign up if you want to see some more videos. Awesome. Well, thank you, and I'll see you the next episode. Have a safe weekend, and I'll see you in about a month's time, I think.